Welcome to today's Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here because today we're looking at one of the most exclusive, highest stakes VIP lists on the entire planet. We're talking about the handful of countries that possess nuclear weapons. This is a topic that literally shapes global history, and we're going to decode exactly how this global nuclear monopoly actually works by diving right into the source material. So let's get right into it.
Now, you might be wondering, out of the more than 190 countries in the world, with all their wealth, all their massive armies, and all their technology, why is it so incredibly hard to join the nuclear club? Why do only a tiny fraction of nations actually have these weapons? Well, it's not an accident. It is entirely by design.
And the whole story really starts with this number, 5. Initially, only 5 countries held this monumental power. We're talking about the USA, Russia, the UK, France, and China. They're what we call the recognized nuclear states. But how did they make sure they stayed the primary holders of this power? How did they lock it in? Well, they essentially built a global fortress, and that fortress is held up by 3 massive pillars.
Let's start with Pillar 1, the legal barrier, specifically the 1968 NPT divide.
Just think about the sheer scale of this agreement. Back in 1968, the world basically came together to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or the NPT. Over 190 countries signed on the dotted line. The main goal, of course, was to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons. But by doing that, they fundamentally froze the global military power dynamic exactly as it was in that specific year.
So here's the grand bargain that the treaty set up. The recognized nuclear states, those original 5, they legally get to keep their weapons. In exchange, the rest of the world makes a massive promise. They agree not to build any. By trading away those military ambitions, they get access to civilian nuclear power technology, for electricity. It was a very stark divide. The haves get to keep what they have, and the have-nots trade the bomb for the power grid.
Moving on to Pillar 2, the physical barrier, which is all about massive technical difficulty.
Because let's say a country just decides to ignore international law. Even if they tear up that treaty, they immediately run headfirst into a literal wall of hardcore science. Building a nuclear bomb is insanely technical. First off, you need weapons-grade enriched uranium or plutonium, and that means running elements through thousands of specialized centrifuges. It's an unbelievably expensive and complex process. On top of that, you need highly advanced engineering, elite physics expertise, and incredibly specialized equipment. It is just an engineering nightmare for any nation trying to start from scratch.
And here's the kicker. Just having deep pockets is not enough. You absolutely cannot just go buy a nuclear bomb on the open market, no matter how rich your country is. A nation has to have a proper, pre-existing scientific infrastructure. It takes decades to organically build the universities, train the physicists, and develop the domestic engineering to actually pull this off. Money alone just won't cut it.
Which brings us to Pillar 3, the punitive barrier, international pressure and sanctions.
So what happens if a country actually has the money, secretly builds all that infrastructure, and tries to sneak past the rules? Well, the global response is incredibly swift and severe. The international system has automatic triggers, including crushing economic sanctions that are literally designed to cripple the violating country's economy. Then comes strict diplomatic isolation, completely cutting them off from the global community. And finally, they face intense international monitoring, specifically rigorous inspections by the IAEA.
We honestly don't have to look far for real-world examples of this. Iran and North Korea are the prime cautionary tales here. Both of these nations have faced immense, crushing pressure, deep isolation, and intense scrutiny precisely because they triggered those exact international enforcement mechanisms. The whole system is set up to make pursuing these weapons as painful as humanly possible.
But, of course, there's a plot twist. Let's talk about the non-NPT rule breakers.
Because despite that legal fortress, the scientific nightmare, and the threat of total global isolation, a few rogue outliers actually managed to bypass the system. I'm talking about Pakistan, India, Israel, and North Korea. So how did they pull it off? Well, the source material points out that these specific nations possessed nuclear weapons precisely because they stepped completely outside the legal framework. They either outright refused to sign the NPT in the first place, or, like in North Korea's case, they joined it and then dramatically walked away.
But refusing to sign a piece of paper wasn't some kind of magic shortcut. Surviving outside the NPT to build an independent nuclear program demanded an astronomical amount of time and national resources. These countries had to build their programs entirely on their own. They bore the full brunt of the technical difficulty and the isolation, with absolutely no safety net from the international community.
Now let's zoom out and look at the geopolitical reality. specifically nuclear club politics and the critique from the Global South.
This brings us to the overarching political reality of why this entire system was built in the first place and who it really protects. The nations that were already powerful, specifically the permanent members of the UN Security Council, they heavily supported this system. And the reason is simple: to maintain their own military and political dominance. By enforcing these rules, they effectively pull the ladder up behind them, making sure no new players can rise up and challenge their authority.
So just to summarize how brilliantly and securely this fortress operates, it really is a three-step lock. Step 1 is the legal treaty that gets everyone to agree not to build them. Step 2 is the extreme technical and scientific difficulty that acts as a natural, physical barrier. And Step 3 is the harsh international enforcement that financially and diplomatically ruins you if you even try. These three pillars just seamlessly work together to form an almost impenetrable wall around this exclusive club.
But as you might guess, a system like this doesn't exist without some major friction. Our source material highlights a really strong geopolitical critique, particularly coming from developing nations in the Global South. The critique is essentially that the system is inherently unfair. Why? Because it just granted legal status to the countries that happened to be powerful at that exact moment in 1968. It effectively legalized their dominance while permanently outlawing everyone else's potential.
So, the final thought I want to leave you with today is this. When we look at this entire structure, the treaties, the science, the sanctions, and the politics, we really have to ask ourselves a tough question. Is this system a necessary shield for global safety, keeping the world's most dangerous weapons out of too many hands, or is it an unfair monopoly on power, designed by the powerful just to keep everyone else in check? It really is a fascinating balance of global power. I hope this explainer has given you a much clearer lens to view it all through. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me today.